For the last couple of months, we've been looking at the book of James, the letter that James wrote to the church. And just kind of as a reminder, since we're towards the tail end of it, I want to give you a simple picture that James gives in the very beginning of why he's writing this letter to Christians, to believers, to the church. And really why we're studying this book, this letter that James writes to the church. And the picture that he gives, it's kind of a sarcastic tone. It's kind of, isn't this kind of foolish? And so the picture I want to give to you before we look at our passage today is that in the very beginning, as he's beginning this letter, the picture that he gives is there are some people in this world, and this is the picture, imagine, that go and look at the mirror. How many of you guys looked in the mirror this morning as you were getting ready for church? Everybody should raise their hand, right? You guys all did, right? Some of you look like you didn't, but I know all of you did, right? You can't help it. You go to your sink and there's a mirror. You brush your teeth and there's a mirror, right? And maybe you didn't look too carefully and you didn't groom yourself too carefully. That's okay. But imagine, James says, that you go and you look at the mirror intently, is what he says, intensely, looking at yourself. I do this every once in a while. I'm not really a vain person, but I do it every once in a while, like, oh yeah, there are some new wrinkles, or I didn't shave this part and there's some hair sticking up, or whatever. You do it once in a while. But you know what's amazing to me is, like, even though you see yourself every morning, you don't scrutinize yourself, you don't look at yourself intensely. And honestly, if I were to give you all a piece of paper and a pencil, and I know some of you aren't very good artists, but to draw what you look like, you might kind of forget a lot of things. Like, you don't realize that you have a mole somewhere, you have a beauty mark somewhere, you have freckles or whatever, however your face goes, because you don't look at yourself that much. And James says, imagine scrutinizing, examining your face very carefully, and saying, okay, I've got it. And then you walk away from that mirror, and immediately you forget what you look like. And in that little analogy in the beginning of the book of James, what he's saying is, what this letter, this whole epistle, what I'm writing to the church about is this. We all need to become very good at practicing examining ourselves. Not just physically, but why we do what we do. Why we say what we say. Why we think what we think. A lot of us, we are not in the practice of doing that. We just kind of go about our day every day without thinking. We eat whatever's put in front of us. We go where we're supposed to go because we have to go to school or we have to go to work. We just fall into these rote patterns without thinking about why we do, why we say what we say, why we live how we live. And the whole thing about James is, I want you to understand that what you do and why you do it is so critical because it reveals your heart. It reveals what you believe. It reveals what you think. Do you guys understand that? And so this is why the book of James is so practical and it's so important. And this morning, he gives us another whole thing, and I want to point this out to you. I want to show you two stories that he talks about that seem disconnected, but they're actually really connected. And I think it's something that really speaks to all of us. And so this morning, this is almost towards the end of the letter now. Here's what he says in James chapter 4, and let me read it to you. I want you to really listen intently to this, because in both of these, think about it. Am I doing this? And I think to a certain extent, we do both of these things in one way or another, maybe to a greater or lesser extent. James chapter 4, beginning with verse 11, it says this. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy, obviously God. But who are you to judge your neighbor? And then another kind of a different story, but it's the same kind of idea that he's trying to give another example of. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. The first one, it says, don't judge. And the second one, it says, don't boast. Now, apart from that don't, how does judging and boast, how is that together? Well, if you look at them very carefully, what you find, what James is intimating, what he's saying is, both of those things come because of an external arrogance and an internal forgetting about God. Now, let me explain this a little bit. A number of years ago, I was talking with one of my good friends, and we were talking about our churches and some of the issues within our churches and how we could kind of maybe get advice from one another. And he was giving me this one example of a lady that was in his church. And when she first came to the church, he thought, wow, she serves so well within the church. And what she did was, she had this really amazing gift of being a great cook. I mean, she just brought baked goods on Sunday. Whenever they had, potlucks or small groups, she would just bring amazing food, and everybody's just like, wow, this is so good. And they just loved her cooking. They'd ask for recipes, but she just delighted in serving to other people within the church that way. But about a year or so after this lady came to the church, another lady came into the church, and she had the same kind of gifting, and she was also a really good cook. Though the second one, he said, was not as good as the first. Okay? You can already see some stuff that's going to be brewing here. Well, he said a little later, after that second lady came into the church, one morning she brought in a bunch of carrot cake. I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of carrot cake, but everybody was just like, this was the best carrot cake that they ever had. You know, she brought it in for the whole church, and they just like, and everybody was raving and just complimenting on her. And you know what happened? The very next week, the first lady who'd been at the church longer brought in carrot cake. So we call this the story carrot cake number 2. And the reason we call it that is because we started seeing a pattern in her life. What she was doing was, as soon as this lady started to take some of her thunder, started being appreciated for some of the things that she was doing, that they thought she was doing just purely out of serving the church, what the pastor began to realize was that she found her worth, her identity, her sense of accomplishment by praise of people for what she did. Do you guys get what I'm saying? And here's what was going on. As soon as this other lady began to take some of that away, she had to what? To feed her. She had to Iron Chef her. She had to say, I'm going to win. And so she brought in the exact same thing, but more extravagant, try to make it taste better, and brought it in. But the thing was, it didn't happen once, it happened continually. She continually had to top her. And you know what I find is when you see what James is talking about, he's saying, don't judge other people. You know what he's basically saying? Do you know why most people judge one another? And here, let me define judging just a little bit for all of you guys, for the youth, for the adults, for the college, for myself. Judging is not the same thing as understanding the truth about somebody. If you know somebody, come on back in. Congrats. Hey, let's give them congrats and applause. You guys look radically different from 5 minutes ago. 10 minutes ago. Judging is not the same as evaluating or assessing. When I meet people, I don't know them, and I start to get to know them. But after a while, you know this from the youth group, the college group, your circle of friends, your co-workers, everybody begins to understand that person. They're on time. They're always late. They're stingy. They're generous. Right? Those are all realities that we can all measure and observe for ourselves. They're loud. They're quiet. And there's nothing wrong with all those kinds of things because that's a part of who that person is, right? I mean, some things are negative and some things are positive. And all of that assessment, all of that evaluating, that's fine. As a Christian, we need to do that. We need to assess and say, this person is responsible, we can give them this. This person is more creative, we need to help them do this. this person. And so we need to assess and do all those things. But what judging is going one step further, and it is deciding whether or not that person is valuable or not, whether or not that person is good or bad, based upon their external things. That's up to God. We don't know what's going on behind why they do what they do. See, he's saying, I didn't know why this woman was doing all that cooking. In the beginning, we kind of assessed it as this. But as we went along, what we found out was that she had a lot of esteem issues, that she found her worth in these things. And so they didn't judge her. They didn't say she was right or wrong. But what was happening is, for her, she needed to defeat or become better than someone else. And what she did by just cooking and just competing in that way, you know what she was doing? By putting someone very subtly down, she was lifting herself up. You understand? And really, that is an example of how we could passive-aggressively judge one another. You know how we judge one another? That's an amazing thing. A lot of times we want to denigrate somebody's accomplishment or what someone else has done or succeeded in. Why? In order to lift ourselves up. I remember this when I was mostly in junior high and high school, but people used to always go around and ask one another, what grade did you get on the test? What did you do? And some people just genuinely are interested and are naive, but most people, when they ask, you can kind of see a pattern. You know what it is? Like the kids that want to feel better about themselves, especially the kids that really do well on those tests, they always go and ask people, oh, you got what? And they want you to ask back, what did you get? And the way that I figured this out really early, and the way I would infuriate them is that when they ask, oh, so what did you get? I would tell them. But then I wouldn't ask them, what did you get? I just walk away. And they didn't like it. Because they wanted to say, I got 100, I got, whatever. And, it was really funny. Why? Because what's going on here is we're not finding our identity and our sense of self-worth and our sense of satisfaction in God, but in pushing other people down or saying, that person's worse than me. And the problem with this is that's not the gospel at all. Every religion, for the most part, says if you attain this level, if you're better than most people, if you are more disciplined, if you follow the law, if you follow the religious duties and regulations better than everyone else, then God will be pleased in you. But the Bible doesn't say that. It says all of you fall short of pleasing God. But in Christ, freely He gives you salvation. And when you understand that, all of a sudden the need to judge one another, to push other people down, to get up, and to feel better about yourself goes away. And there's such freedom in that. On the flip side of the coin, there's another group. Those that are actually very successful. And so within the church, there were those businessmen, there were those that other people looked up at because they were financially successful. And it looked like wherever they went, whatever plans they made, they got financially wealthy, they got success. And so some of these people were probably at the church, in the early church, I don't know what it was. They got around the wine bowls or I don't know, or the bread bowls, and they would sit around and talk after the worship, and they would say, yeah, next year we're going to, Corinth, or we're going to Ephesus, and we're going to, start our business there. They're doing so well here in Jerusalem. We're going to go over there, and we're going to make all this money, and then, probably to make it sound spiritual, we're going to donate it back to the church. Something like that. There are other people around that weren't as successful would be hearing that. And what James is saying is, you shouldn't do that. That kind of boasting is evil. Why? Planning is not evil. Being successful is not evil. Making a lot of money is not even evil. But what he's saying is why do you need to make it public? Why do you need to boast about it? Because again, you're not focused on God. See, when we have successes, you know what a lot of us do, even Christians, myself included, we tend to build ourselves up as it's all about me. Do you guys get what I'm saying? It's an amazing thing. The truly mature Christian, the one that really understands God's grace, realizes that it is by God's grace that we're able to have success, that we're able to have any kind of good measure of ability, talent, any of those things. And so what's going on in this passage is James is pointing out a couple of things. He's saying, a lot of you, the problem is that you have not reflected on why you do what you do. Why do you judge others? Why do you boast? Is it not because you have forgotten to look at God? And instead, you're looking at yourself. If you feel inadequate, maybe you judge to push other people down. That's not the reason. If you boast, maybe it's because you're so full of yourself that you feel like you don't need God. But in either case, for a Christian, that does not make sense at all. It ought not to be that way for us as Christians. So then what is the solution for us? How do we overcome this? And James gives us a few ideas that I think we want to really understand. And it's this. Number one, we have to stop trying to be more than what we are. There's nothing as kind of comical. I mean, it's funny within children, and it's funny within some people that are less mature, not quite there, but there's nothing as kind of sad as someone who tries to pretend to be more than what they are. You guys understand? You don't have to boast. You don't have to exaggerate. Who you are is who God loves. God created you to be the way that you are. That's the way it is. But we all think that we have to be more because we want to be more. And so we maybe exaggerate or we, increase our claims and we, build ourselves up more than we ought to. Or maybe we push other people down to feel better about ourselves. But what James says is this: stop trying to be more than who you are. He says, number one, who are you to judge your neighbors? You're not the judge. God is the only judge. And then later on he says, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. If you really understand and accept who you are, that you are actually nothing, and yet everything because God loves you. Do you know what makes anything valuable? Why is gold valuable? Why is it worth about $1,000 an ounce? Because why? Because it's rare? Yeah, I mean, it is. But I've seen some really ugly, rare things that people try to sell that I wouldn't buy. It's not valuable. Why is something valuable? It's because someone is willing to pay that much for it. You guys understand? At least one person. That's what gives it value. Do you guys understand? If nobody's willing to pay money or give up anything for that specific item, no matter how rare it is, to be the one-of-a-kind, ugliest drawing ever, painting ever, no one's going to buy it, right? No one's going to pay for it. It has no value. Do you guys get what I'm saying? So why are you valuable? Because God was willing to pay with the life of His Son, Jesus Christ, for you. Your value comes because God has given you, not inherently because of what you are. You're a bunch of chemicals worth, I guess with inflation, a couple of bucks. There's nothing spectacular about me or you. There's billions of us all walking around the earth. There's somebody that can do anything that you can do amazingly well, better than you. There's someone taller, there's someone stronger, there's someone smarter, everything, anything than you. Except God says, each one of you is so valuable to me, I would send Jesus to die on the cross for just you. That's what we're valuable. That's where your value comes from. Not what college you might go to, not how much money that you make, not how attractive the world says you are or not. And when you begin to understand that, then you begin to delight in how uniquely God made you. And I'll tell you something, then the world begins to say, oh, that's interesting. It's amazing to me because it cracks me up because I saw this in high school and college, and I see it in adult life. You know how a house gets sold? It's amazing to me. A house price goes up as soon as a few people are interested in it, and then they start bidding it out. As long as one person is interested, other people are like, oh, why are they interested in it? You take some ugly painting, and some expert says, oh my God, this is so valuable. Or some rich person wants to buy it. Then other people now become interested in it. And when you begin to understand that you are loved by God and valuable by God, you know what happens? You begin to have this confidence in who you are in God. No matter what you do, or don't do, or able to do. And there is a winsomeness, there is an attractiveness that now comes out from you. That's what we need to exhibit as Christians. The second thing that James says is, this is something I say all the time, obey God. How does obeying God overcome our insecurities? You see, here's what James says, verse 17. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. Why does James throw this in after judging and boasting? Why does he do that? Because when we obey God, we're free from judging and boasting. The more we obey God, the more instantly we obey God, the more freedom we have from what? Judging and boasting. The problem is a lot of us, we have a lot of areas of disobedience in our life, myself included. There's a lot of things that we know about who God is and how He wants us to live, and we're not very obedient to Him. And as a result, all those flaws that are still there, the way that we cover it up is by judging, pushing people down, pushing ourselves up. That's how it works out. But the more obedient you are in God, the less concerned you are about the voices that you hear in this world. When you know what your task is, when you know who your master is, when you know what purpose you're going to follow, when you hear only one voice, then you do not find the need to excuse yourself or build yourself up or make any of those things. In other words, if the president of the United States or the boss of your company or somebody at your school of great importance and influence gave you a task to do, you don't have to worry about stuff. In other words, I don't know, maybe I'll make this analogy for high school and college students, but especially in high school. In high school, can you go out of the class in the middle of the class and walk around the campus and go get some food in the cafeteria? No, you can't. But if you have a specific task that was given to you by the teacher or the principal or somebody that gives you that purpose during class time, then you can go out and you can just show that path. And you don't have to worry about making excuses. You don't have to worry about trying to build yourself up. You know that you have a task. You know who entrusted that to you. And as a result, in your obedience, you don't have to worry about it because the one that matters the most, you are following their instruction. The highest power, the highest authority. Who higher than God? Nobody. See, when we say, this is what I do, and here's how I'm going to be successful, and we're all trying to become self-important while in our boasting, it's because we've forgotten that the most important person, the most important being, God of all the universe, if He says something and you're obeying that, there's no reason that you need to boast. You don't need to give reasons. You don't need to give excuses to anybody about what you do. Now, it doesn't hurt to tell them, but you don't find that necessity. There's a freedom that comes. But the problem is a lot of us, because we have such sin and such disobedience still in our life, come up with excuses. We get defense. What happens when you're a mom and dad, especially the younger folks? I know this happens to my kids, but when you didn't do something that they asked you to do, and they come and ask you, did you do it? And your answer is like, no, I'm so sorry, I didn't do it, I apologize. Dad, mom, whatever, I repent, dust and ashes, and I'll do it right away, and I'll never be disobedient again. We don't say things like that. We go, I was about to do it, but you didn't give me enough time. Why'd you ask me so fast? We say things like that. I know I have. You didn't say by when. We get defensive. We come with all these excuses. And so that's why parents get like legalistic. Okay, and I'm going to email you, and I'm going to put a timestamp on it, and I'm going to tell you exactly when to do it, by when, right? And how, and all that stuff. And it's not fun. Why do we get defensive? Because we're not obedient. You see what I'm getting at? When you know who you are and you don't think of yourself more, but you value yourself because of the value God's given to you, and if you are obedient and in line and connected in communion with God, then all these needs for judging others, all these needs for boasting, all these things that happen that tear down the church and break down relationships start to disappear. And we're able to fully love one another much more. It's an amazing truth. And this is what James is getting at. He said, come on, let's get rid of all this junk, all this garbage, all this playing, acting, all this stuff that's going on, all this positioning, all this pecking order, all this I'm better, I'm not better, all this. Let's get rid of all of that stuff. And instead, let's love one another the way that God loves us. I want to encourage all of you this morning. Look in the mirror, to examine yourselves. Trust me, my confession to you this morning is I do both. Everybody likes to hear praise. And sometimes in our mind, well, God, it's not better than that person. All of us, we have some boastful moments. And it may not go away in an instant, it may not go away in a moment, but if we begin to work upon those things, guess what happens? We'll come to a place of freedom where we really are free to be who God created us to be. Jesus said, if you're truly my disciples, you will hold to my teaching. And then you will know the truth. It says, if you're really my disciples, you'll obey what I've taught you. And then he says, then you will know the truth. And the truth will set you free. It's really weird. He says, first you obey, then you will know the truth. It's not like you know the truth and then you obey, but you just start to obey. Why? Because you say, well, this is what it seems like you're saying, God, so I'm just going to start trusting you. And then it says, then your mind will be filled with the knowledge of God. And then that will bring you to a freedom where you're no longer, the freedom that comes from no longer worrying about what other people say. But instead, you're free to be all that God created. May that